In the world of business, it's often the things you can't see that can really hurt you. So today, we are going to pull back the curtain on one of the most powerful tools out there for seeing what's coming down the road. It's called PESTLE analysis. And really, it's your guide to the invisible forces that shape entire industries. It's the question that keeps founders and CEOs up at night, right? How can you have the best product, the smartest team, a totally solid plan, and still get completely blindsided by events that seem to come out of nowhere? What is going on? Well, it turns out the biggest threats, and hey, the biggest opportunities too, they often come from way outside your company's walls. We're talking about these massive currents in the world around you that you just can't control. But, and this is the key, you can learn to see them coming. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to define what these invisible forces really are. Then, we'll introduce PESTLE as our strategic radar and break down each of its 6 parts. After that, we get really practical, showing you how to actually do an analysis and, most importantly, turn it into real action. If you stick around, you'll be well on your way to mastering this absolutely essential skill. All right, let's start with the big picture. Before you can analyze anything, you have to get your head around the huge, complex world your business is actually a part of. So strategists call this the macro environment. The best way to think about it is like the weather system for business. It's these massive forces, government policies, big economic shifts, new social trends. You can't change the weather, right? But you can definitely check the forecast and prepare for it. And this slide right here makes a super important point. Think of your microenvironment as your immediate neighborhood. Your customers, your competitors, your suppliers. You have some direct influence there. But the macro environment, that's the whole climate system. It's global, it's totally uncontrollable, and your only choice is to adapt. And this is exactly where PESTLE becomes your go-to tool. Okay, so if you have to adapt to this giant uncontrollable environment, how in the world do you do it? Well, that brings us to PESTLE. Just think of it as your strategic radar. It's designed to help you systematically scan for and make sense of those powerful invisible forces. At its core, PESTLE is just an acronym. It stands for political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. It's a really smart, structured way to make sure you're not missing any big changes happening out there that could slam into your organization. So let's do it. Let's break down that external world. We're going to walk through each of these 6 PESTLE factors one by one, using a real-world example for each to show you just how powerful this can be. First up, P is for political. This is everything from government stability and trade policy to how taxes work. Brexit is a perfect and pretty dramatic example. That one political decision didn't just tweak a few rules, it completely rewrote the playbook for businesses, creating new trade barriers, labor shortages, and just years of uncertainty. Next, we've got E for economic. This is all about the financial health of the economy, things like inflation, growth, interest rates. Take a look at Pakistan's recent inflation crisis. For a business on the ground, this wasn't some abstract number. It meant the cost of materials went through the roof, their customers suddenly couldn't afford to buy as much, and a collapsing currency made anything imported crazy expensive. Then we have S for social, which covers demographics, culture, lifestyle trends. Now, here's a great example of how a social factor can be a massive opportunity. With 64% of its population under 30, Pakistan has this huge, tech-savvy youth demographic. That's not just a statistic. It's the engine creating a brand new market for pretty much everything, from e-commerce to digital banking. T stands for technological. This is all about innovation and the relentless pace of change. The smartphone revolution is the ultimate example, isn't it? This one device didn't just improve old industries, it completely wiped some out. Think about Kodak, while creating totally new ones we couldn't have imagined, like app development and ride-sharing. It's just a perfect reminder that tech both creates and destroys. All right, now for L, which is legal. This gets into the specific laws and regulations you have to play by. A real game changer here was the EU's GDPR, and that wasn't just a rule for Europe, it had a huge global ripple effect. Suddenly, any company with EU customers had to completely overhaul its data practices or face these crippling fines. It single-handedly made data privacy a top concern for businesses everywhere. And finally, we have the second E, environmental. This includes things like climate change, sustainability, and access to natural resources. The global push to ban single-use plastics is a fantastic example. For a lot of businesses, yeah, it meant higher costs and scrambling to find alternatives. But for others, it created this massive opportunity to innovate and lead the way with new eco-friendly materials. Okay, so now you get the 6 factors. But how do you actually use them? Let's switch gears from theory to practice and talk about turning these broad observations into sharp, actionable insights. The process itself is actually a pretty straightforward 6-step loop. You define your scope, you gather information, you analyze the factors to find your key opportunities and threats. But, and this is so critical, it doesn't stop there. You then have to develop a response, and maybe most importantly, you have to treat this as a living document. You've got to constantly monitor and update your analysis. It's a cycle, not a one-and-done report. So let's see how this works in the real world. Imagine an e-commerce startup in Pakistan. The analysis quickly lays out the core strategic challenge. The opportunities are huge, right? A young, tech-savvy population that wants convenience. But the threats are just as real. Crushing inflation, tons of competition, and serious logistical hurdles. See, the analysis doesn't just hand you an answer, but it perfectly frames the exact problem you need to solve. Now, here's the thing. Even a brilliant analysis can end up just collecting dust on a shelf. So let's talk about the common mistakes and how you can make sure your PESTLE work actually leads to real, meaningful action. The single biggest trap people fall into with any kind of strategic analysis is being way too generic. And this is the difference between a totally useless observation and a truly powerful insight. Take a look at this sentence. Economic factors are important for sales. I mean, duh. It's completely unhelpful. Sure, it's true, but it tells you nothing. It gives you zero basis for making a strategic decision. Now this is what a powerful insight looks like. It's specific, it's data-driven. Inflation at 27% isn't just a number, it's a specific force that has a measurable impact, a 15 to 20% drop in purchasing power for your target customer. That is an insight you can build a real strategy around. It's also really important to see how PESTLE fits in with other strategy tools like SWOT. Think of it this way. PESTLE is your telescope looking out at the world. The opportunities and threats you spot with that telescope become the direct inputs for the O and T in your SWOT analysis. They're two sides of the same strategic coin, and they are absolutely designed to work together. And all of this brings us to the ultimate goal here, which is mastering what we call strategic awareness. I want you to remember this. The point of a PESTLE analysis is not to create a perfect 50-page report. The real goal is to use the process to see the world more clearly so you can make smarter, more informed strategic decisions. And if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. In a world that's always changing, no one can give you certainty. It's just not possible. But a framework like PESTLE, it gives you something even more valuable: preparedness. It gives you a structured way to anticipate, to adapt, and to act. So I'll leave you with a question to think about. Whether it's for your company, your career, or your whole industry, what's on your radar right now? Thanks for tuning in.